In today's episode, we look at Britain's deadliest doormen from the northeast versus the southeast, part 1. These guys really are some of the best fighting men in the country and a match for any region. Without any further ado, let's get started. Lee Duffy versus Matt Legg. Lee Duffy, a legendary street fighter and good amateur prospect before leaving the boxing behind and getting more into the weightlifting, drugs, taxing and the dark side of life. A much feared fighting man who survived numerous serious attacks on his life before finally meeting his maker after a brutal fight with former friend Dave Ellison, who stabbed Lee as they fought for their lives. Davey Ellison was cleared in court as it was ruled as self-defence. Many say Lee was a bully, but his friends would say he would fight any man and was much loved by those close to him. Too young an age to go out the way he did. One of the most formidable men on the list, and I'm told he did work the door a few times, so he had to be on the northeast deadliest doormen. Matt Legg, decorated amateur boxer, one of the best in the country, turned over professional to much excitement, signing with Frank Maloney, now Kelly. Great coming forward, strong aggressive boxer who fought James Toney and Anthony Joshua in memorable career losses. His talent should have seen him go further, but a good boxer nevertheless. Worked the door a couple of times and like Lee was a very dangerous street fighter and gangland enforcer for a period before turning his life around as a PT, YouTuber and campaigner. A top man and good friend. As legendary as Lee was, I don't think many would argue that Matt Legg's level of boxing, street fighting and his not much talked about past history in high level gangland work would put him top of my list. Eddie Elwood versus Tony Tucker. Eddie Elwood, champion bodybuilder and also high-level amateur boxer, who only lost to the tough Manny Burgo in his area ABA finals, is an awesome athlete who is also a huge presence on the door scene. A gentleman and professional, but if crossed, unmatchable for strength and his iron will. No slouch with his hands either. A top man who fought tooth and nail during the pandemic, campaigning to keep his gym open for the sake of his clients' mental health. Has to be on the northeast list. The infamous Tony Tucker. What more can I say about him? He's ridiculed to a certain degree in the Rise of the Foot Soldier films, but was a serious man, ex-army and astute businessman who built up a big security firm, was ruthless in his pursuit for wealth and power, physically strong and could have a fight when required. Life fell apart when hitting the drugs too hard in a very intense period that cost him his life, but has to be on the southeast list. Personally, if I had to choose, I'd have Eddie all day long for his brute strength, boxing ability and his level head. Viv Graham versus Marcus Redwood. The late Viv Graham needs no introduction. A very hard man who left his rural home to become the governor of Newcastle with frightening power, speed and fighting ability. Much loved by family and friends, feared by enemies, he was sadly gunned down after upsetting major league villains. Unmatchable in the fighting stage during his era, a top pick for the northeast. Marcus Redwood, another powerful man and experienced doorman who ruled the roost on the door scene in Margate and is said to have had hundreds of fights. A good friend of the late Dave Courtney, a man not to be messed with and a worthy spot on the southeast side. I think I have to go with Viv Graham on this one. The legendary status says it all and from all accounts was a phenom in the street fighting stakes. Unfairly criticised for the turnout with the tough Stu Watson in the Hobbs nightclub fight. I don't believe he really wanted to hurt Watson badly that night from what I've been told. Big Brian Cochrell versus Big Lee Chapman. Big Brian Cochrell, a beast of a man in his prime, 20 stone plus, with fast hands, a huge force across the northeast, splits opinion like many other former taxmen do, but it's undoubted he was one of the top men in his area, fighting wise. Had two controversial fights with another hard man, Dave Carside, and a clash with the notorious Lee Duffy before becoming friends with him and fellow taxman. Definitely deserves to be near the top of the list for northeast top doormen. Lee Chapman is a living legend, still overseeing the doors to this day, a huge man who is a skilled judo practitioner as well as heavy-handed striker. Has allegedly put to sleep a few big boxing names in the past, although is very humble and quiet about those past episodes. Well known for being the doorman Roy Shaw wrote about in his book, where Roy was beaten up. There are two varying stories to that, and Roy was in his 50s at the time. But make no mistake, Lee Chapman is the real deal when it comes to door work and dealing with violence. Tough one to pick, but I think with Lee Chapman's judo skills as well as his stand-up, I would pick Lee Chapman on this one. Mick Soby versus Michael Kelly. Mick's a legend from Hartlepool, as tough as they come, and the #1 doorman in his day. There's a great book about his life, fights and prison stories, a real old school warrior. I believe he was fighting illness, so all the best to Mick. I enjoyed his book, and he is one legitimate hardman, and really was one of the top doormen in Hartlepool in his day. Michael Kelly is one of the old school doormen that was a force on the scene in Essex, then London, in the 80s and 90s. A very tough guy, originally from Ireland, who came over and earned his stripes working with the likes of Lenny before becoming an established leading doorman at the famous Hollywood nightclub in Romford with the likes of Tony Tucker, Lee Chapman, the Colonel Mark Rothermel, and loads of other top doormen. Michael ended up running a vast door operation in North London and came into conflict with many big firms from that area, which he talks about in his Liquid Bullet podcast. And I'll be speaking to him soon on a podcast about other stories he missed on there. It's one not to miss. Really interesting fella, Michael is. Great guy to speak to, and I'll be looking forward to that one. Okay, for those who have made it this far, just to clarify a few things. This was part 1. I know in the comments I'm going to get a stream of names. A lot of those names will be on part 2. This is just my opinion. It's a bit of fun. It's my fantasy door team. If I was running a boozer and I had a choice of the best doormen from all the different regions from the past, and they're my picks. I'm looking forward to seeing who you would have taken amongst those people that I put up, or even other suggestions. Not a problem. So, a couple other things. I know that this is going to be brought up. There'll be a lot of abuse for Brian Cochrell. I don't know Brian. I have spoken to people who do know him. It's a fact that he was one of the top guys in the area from a fighting perspective. He was feared. That is just fact. People like Paddy Comrie and whatnot used to use him as a heavy. He was mates with Lee Duffy for a short period. You know, people who know have told me how it is. So whether people don't like him because they think he tells too many stories on his podcast, I've heard all sorts of different allegations. I'm not getting involved in that. I don't know either way. So, but factually, as a doorman, he was one of the most powerful and dangerous in that area. So that's why Brian's on the list, and deservedly so. What other controversial ones were there? I'm not really sure. But that's just my pick. I've not seen any of them in action apart from Matt Legg. So I wouldn't know. But I know people who know them all, who've told me stories and whatnot, and who they think are the top men on the door from their eras, from those two areas. So that's where I've come at it from. But like I say, just a bit of fun. Thank you to all of you who have made it to the end. If you hit the like and subscribe, I'd be very much grateful. I'll be trying to bring in part 2 of this in the next few days, latest by Monday, hopefully. I look forward to reading your comments. Okay, take care. Have a good night.